YouTube! Welcome to day 35 of my birthday countdown vlog. 5 more days until I turn 40. So let's see, 1977, when I was 5, most of that year, I actually spent in Canada. My grandmother went up there to visit an old friend of hers that she knew from back in Belgium. And in fact, he was a friend of the family, and I called him Uncle Willy. I think his name was Willy something or other. Anyway, so we went up there. He lived in Coquitlam, just outside of Vancouver. And we spent off and on about 9 months altogether up there. We did come back to the States for Christmas, but the rest of the time we spent up in Canada for nearly 9 months altogether. And because of Canadian law, because of my age, I actually had to be enrolled in kindergarten while I was up there. And my grandmother enrolled me into a local school up there that, oddly enough, even though this wasn't Quebec, this was British Columbia, taught classes in French only. So starting in first grade, all the students were being taught in French all day. And I had to learn French in kindergarten. So I had some intensive French instruction throughout the time I went there. And by the time I came back to Chicago permanently, I was actually, I would say, semi-fluent in French. Of course, because I never used it after I came back to Chicago, I never remembered it. And so there isn't very much of French I can say. I actually took 2 more years of French, 1 year in high school and 1 year in college. And these days, the main thing I can tell people is, je ne parle pas français. I don't speak any French. But yeah, that was an interesting time going to kindergarten up there. I had a really good friend named Alex Tang, and he was a real sweet boy, and he and his brother were both in kindergarten, even though he was a year older. It turned out that his parents immigrated to Canada when he was an infant, and they left him behind with his grandparents in Hong Kong for 3 years while they got themselves settled in Canada. And while they were in Canada, they had their second child, Ben. And after about 3 years, they went back to pick him up and take him back home with them. However, he didn't remember them. I mean, he'd been an infant the last time he saw his parents, and he really loved his grandparents and he really missed them. And so there was definitely some chafing going on between him and his parents because of this. And unfortunately, his mother was a rather cruel person. I personally witnessed one thing from her where we were invited over for dinner one evening, and it was the mother and the father and the younger son Ben and my grandmother and myself, but my friend Alex was not at the table. And I was like, where is Alex? And I insisted I wanted to see Alex, and I ran around the house looking for him, and I found him down in the cellar in the dark, kneeling with bare legs on a pallet of hard peas while he was eating dry bread and drinking water. And that was his dinner that night. Apparently that is how he was fed every single day at home. When he came to school, he had a nice packed lunch, just like his brother did. I know his mother didn't want other people to see how he was fed usually. It wouldn't be okay for her to send him to school with just dry bread and water. But at home, that's all he ate. And I felt so bad for him, and I was like, what kind of a person are you to do this to your son? He's such a great boy. And I kind of wish that my grandmother had reported it, but I don't think she knew that she could. I don't think she knew that there was an option out there for her to report it, or she didn't want to cause trouble or whatnot. But I knew that Alex was planning to run away from home as soon as he was old enough to do so, and I assume he probably did. And I hope he's still out there, and I hope that he had the wherewithal to get away from that and to eventually thrive. But I remember really liking him. I would always help him tie his shoes, and for that he would give me half of the orange that he had packed in his lunch every day, which was really sweet because he, didn't get to eat that kind of stuff at home, and still he was willing to share that with me. The other thing I remember from that year when I was in going to that kindergarten specifically, one, I remember climbing up to the top of the playground thing where there's a slide, and there was a rope thing to climb up and a pole to slide down and things. And I remember being up there, and there's only two ways to get down. One was to climb backwards down the ladder. The other way was to slide down the pole. Well, I panicked. Here I am, little 5-year-old me, and I was, knee-high to a grasshopper, and I was scared out of my mind. And I think I was a good 7-8 feet off the ground at the top of this thing. Because I remember my teacher was down below, and I think she even brought the principal up, and he was like a 6-foot-tall guy. And I was towering over both of them. Neither one of them could just pick me up and grab me off the thing. And they kept telling me to jump and they'd catch me, but I was scared of doing that too. I think it took a good, it felt like forever, but it must have been at least a good hour for them to coax me down off of that structure. And I never ever went back up there again. So yes, I have a fear of heights, and I think I discovered that day. So that was rather embarrassing. And another thing that happened quite regularly while I was going to kindergarten was there was a group of boys who, for some reason, took great pleasure in basically kidnapping me every day. So I would be out playing in the playground, I'd be on the swing, whatever, and as I was walking by this one set of bushes to get to the swings, or come back from the swings, they would grab me. And they literally would just tie me up, stuff a cloth in my mouth so I couldn't scream, tied my hands and legs behind my back, basically trussed me up like a pig, and left me. And the teacher would have to come out and find me and untie me and bring me back to the classroom because they could never find me. I didn't come back after the end of recess when the bell rang. And that happened almost daily. So you can see, even though I wasn't in Chicago, even there I was picked on. And I was, again, I was a head shorter than most kids my age. I was very stunted in my growth, and I think that kind of made me easier to pick on. So that was fun. But the fun thing was we lived with my Uncle Billy in his house. He had a nice little house and a beautiful garden. He had a peach tree and a plum tree, and we had a blueberry bush, and I'd help pick the blueberries, and my grandmother would make fresh blueberry pancakes almost every morning, or at least until we ran out of blueberries anyway. And she had a big vegetable patch that she planted and grew. And my Uncle Billy actually built me a sandbox. He worked on a ship that went up and down the river out into the ocean. I don't remember what kind of ship it was. I just knew he was on a ship. And he actually went along one of the beaches and filled up the back of a truck with sand and built me a sandbox, which was really kind of cool. And there were kids that lived next door that I got to play with, and it was my first time ever living in a really kind of suburban area, living in an actual house. There was a little grocery store across the street, a little corner store, and I remember eating Sluggos, which were basically their dreamsicles, orange the orange frozen ice with the ice cream inside. But they were called Sluggos up there. And I do remember coming back, and I picked up the Canadian A. People would tell me when I was a little kid, it's like, what are you, from Canada? Because I would say A a lot. I've grown out of that habit since then, but apparently I did that for quite a few years. So those months had quite an impact on me. But they were good memories too. You know, despite the little kidnapping incidents and things, overall they were good memories. And it was a really good experience, and it was nice to have learned yet another language when I was still that young, where I was able to absorb it, so that by the time I actually took French class again in high school, my pronunciation was really good, but it's probably because I really got a chance to learn it when I was younger. So that was good. Anyway, that was my big thing for 1977, so until tomorrow, bye.